So what you need to do is position your podium so we can, kind of see your, face when you're talking. It's kind of weird.
Let me scoot back a little bit.
Get it back a little bit. Well, that gets you. Why don't you put this table over that way? There you go.
Good.
So that, you can kind of address, Dr. Jones will be here,
Okay.
but we want to, your time. And Beverly, I can move that back up.
There we go.
I had to move it down. So there we go on that. Let's see. I am going to zoom our record. Make
No,
sure
it's not
that's why I said let me do that. It always does this. So let me come down here. All right, now see if you're there.
There we go. Now we're in business.
Have to hold your mouth right, don't it?
Well, there's some kind of a flag in the signal, something other, so when you start the record back up, it cuts that signal off.
Oh, well, I'm glad it's interesting. Good to know. Good
So
to
you
know.
just hit the button down there, the back button right here,
Yeah, and get, yeah.
and then it'll reprogram that to work again. Now, as simple as that sounds, it took me a day to figure it out.
But I know.
But this place is amazing in that you have to reach, snake your hand up or reach over the top.
The store,
Short people, do, so they got on a stove.
that's the funniest thing.
But you tell people this until they come and see it. They would not believe it, but I tell this online, the students, they think it's not worth it. Till they get here and realize, no, he's actually telling the truth. What I really want to do, that sleepy boy that works down there in the office sometimes when he gets back, what I really want to do is this, that's my, I want to put that USB. I think somebody small enough hands could get it in, so we wouldn't have to do the switch back and forth
Right.
on that all the time. Let's leave the chip. But if it was one of them small ones, like for the portable mouse system,
Yeah,
but as long as that one is, I don't know if
it's
that
probably not gonna go in.
it's probably not gonna go in. It's too close to the wall back there, but if I could get him up here, hold him up there over the head and see if, see if we could figure out a way to get that to work. But, kind of like it's back in the fall before I started cleaning up my evening. So my wife had me go to the cookout there in Cornelius, and he went to hand me my change out the window. 2 teenage boys with me. And I mean, it was just like an everyday thing. And so he dropped my change. And he just looked at the other one and said, hold my legs. And he dove out the window at the drive-thru, got the money. And it's like they did that every day. It's like a normal part of going to cookout.
That's so
Like,
funny.
I love kids. I just love kids. High school age kids. Just like, oh, yep.
Hey, Dr. Knight.
Dr. Knight, thank you and welcome.
What was that?
Here with us today. We appreciate your time here for Birdie today. I'm going to go ahead and get us started since we have everybody here. I guess it's still for another minute. Good morning. This is Dale Lamb, Gardner-Webb University. We're here today for Birdie final dissertation defense. With us today is Dr. Shay Knight. She's director of school counseling at Greer High School. Welcome, Dr. Knight. Thank you. And again, thank you for partnering with Birdie during her project. Also, Dr. Betsy Jones is here with us today. She's an adjunct and part of our faculty here in the DEOL program at Gardner-Webb. And so without further ado, we're going to turn it over to Birdie to present her Greer High School on-track program communications project.
All right, so my name is Birdie Barbare, and I work with the Greer High School On Track program, and the area of focus for us was the area of communications. So just a little bit of an introduction. The On-Track program works with students, staff members, and parents. That is the people who make up the stakeholders of the On-Track program. The On-Track program uses early warning indicators to track the well-being of students and to determine what actions need to occur in order to promote student success. This program applies scientific-based best practices in meeting protocols, collaboration, and information decision-making process, and used to use data in order to best implement the most appropriate interventions. Their whole overall goal is to positively impact behavior, attendance, and grades for the students in the On-Track program. And these are the students that they identify as at risk based on those 3 areas of need. So the problem statement for my project was there's a lack of stakeholder involvement and information is not being equitably shared across a diverse array of communication outlets. If you looked at the picture here, one guy's holding a sign saying, come over here, and this would kind of be like our on-track leaders. And then on the other side would maybe be your parents and students and teachers, and they're saying how. So it's not an issue if they don't want to work together. They just have to find the right resources to be able to make a bridge to bridge that gap and come together so that they can have the same goal and mission in mind. So for the limitations, I wanted to kind of address this early on when we started, when I started working with Dr. Knight back in 2020. This, of course, is when the COVID-19 global pandemic hit. So the first limitation was there was a lack of student or stakeholder involvement due to COVID-19 concerns and restrictions. On top of that, COVID-19 caused the school shutdowns, so there was no in-person meet-to-meet facing, so they were unable to meet with students in person. They would have to try to send out Google links or Zoom meeting links and try to hope that that student or parent got online. So there was a lot of issues there with just being able to actually meet with those students. So those were some of the early on limitations. The last one was there's a huge language barrier. Greer High School has 32% of their students being Hispanic or Latino. So there's a language barrier there, and we had to kind of address that throughout this project as well. The research question for my project is how can the On-Track program communication outlets enhance program awareness, meet the communication needs of all stakeholders, and better all stakeholders' involvement. So for my literature review, I dove into quantitative data and research, qualitative data and research, and then for my theoretical framework, I went off of Chris Argyris' double loop theory and Nick Luhmann's social systems theory. And we'll kind of dive a little bit deeper into them into the next slides. For my literature review for quantitative research and data, I looked at surveys and how they attempt to identify phenomena that occurs in a given population, and it explores the possible reasonings and correlations that attribute to such occurrences. Moreover, surveys seek to better understand the demographic data, the habitual patterns, the societal norms, and the respondent insights to best evaluate all data points and produce the best research-based recommendations. For the qualitative data and research, throughout the 1980s, qualitative research was identified as being the better method of exploring human behavior as a way for researchers to observe human behavior, ask open-ended questions, encourage respondents to answer candidly, and predict future patterns or behavior. This allowed the researcher to identify the best type of interventions, strategies, and recommendations for the partnering organizations that they were working with. Chris Argyris' double loop theory, Sharon Cartwright kind of explained his idea went a little forward, by saying that double loop learning helps people acquire and integrate new information and develop new skills, and to possibly question and disregard familiar or perhaps maybe dysfunctional ways of thinking, feeling, and acting. Therefore, it's not always the methods of reaching the desired outcome that cause those stagnant or poorer results, but rather maybe the objective itself that needs to be reprioritized or reconsidered. So this is something that I looked in and used as my theoretical framework as It seemed like On Track was doing a great job in just implementing their program, but maybe they needed a new goal to focus on to kind of hit those issues that we saw with the language barriers and communication issues like that. For Nick Luhmann's social system theory, he describes a social system as any component such as an institution, agency, or group that collectively work in partnership to produce a whole entity. This allows researchers to recognize relationships that cause people to be associated with one another, which kind of impacts the overall goals that the group are striving for. He also kind of alludes that positive change can occur if it's widely accepted by everyone involved, and if it's promoted by the vast majority. People in the social system, if you can get them to buy into that overarching goal, you're going to have a lot of success with it. They also need to know what's my personal role or responsibility to the overarching goal. How do I benefit personally? And then how is it going to help everyone in the long haul? So this was a great thing because when we're looking at On Track, it's one social system of people. And if we can get them to all buy into that endpoint and know how they serve in their own role, then we can be successful in this communications plan. So for my methodology, I use mixed methodology, meaning both quantitative and qualitative data to guide me in the process of developing recommendations and my action plan. My interview questions in the qualitative section of this research were formatted in explanatory design. The explanatory design questions will support my mixed methodology approach. I also examined the question of why stakeholders felt certain ways about communication questions, which is the essential objective of the explanatory design and research. For quantitative, I developed a quantitative assessment tool through Qualtrics, which was a survey comprised of 10 questions. Of those 10 questions, 4 dealt with program implementation, 4 reflected on program outcomes, and the final 2 questions were open-ended questions. The open-ended questions were really designed to give people a little bit more voice and kind of draw off of what were your experiences and what type of insights might you have that can further help us in this research. For questions 1 through 8 on the survey, the respondents were able to use a 4-point Likert scale where they indicated whether they strongly disagreed, agreed, or strongly agreed with each statement. I developed 3 versions of the same survey. They were just phrased differently depending on the subpopulation that was being surveyed. For my qualitative data, I did some interviews. I developed a qualitative assessment tool, which was an interview that was comprised of 6 questions. I developed 3 versions of that, just like I did with the survey. They were the same questions, just phrased specifically based on the subpopulation that was being interviewed. The 6 questions reflected on potential future recommendations based on the quantitative survey data that I received. And it still afforded them the opportunity to expand on their own personal experiences and even offer recommendations if they had any for themselves. The questions primarily on these interviews, questions focus on improving on-track communication areas such as social media, eliminating language barriers, sharing informational updates through reminders, updates, and progress reports, and building relationships / eliminating invisible barriers. In order to randomize this interview selection process, I sent out an email to all 3 groups, and I selected the first 2 response from each group to ensure that it was randomized. So whoever was the first to respond back, those were the 2 from each subpopulation. Once I received that back, I then sent out to the 2 from each of the groups the survey data analysis document, the 4 identified themes based on the data that I'd received from the surveys, and then my recommendations that I was trying to promote, and then the interview questions, just so that they would be familiar with all those documents and had time to review it, come in ready with what they thought could be a good change, and maybe even enhance the recommendations further if possible. For my quantitative data, based on My surveys, I received 18 back from the staff members, 16 back from the students, and 6 from parents. There were a total of 10 questions. My survey return rate was 32%. Based on the standard deviations, the student group responses were grouped more around the mean or were more compact. So that just means that they're a little bit more closely aligned in their responses. For the staff and parent groups, they were a little bit more spread out from the mean, just meaning that they had a little bit more diverse answers or responses back. For my p-value, when reflecting on Salkind's, the known confidence standard for social sciences is a 5% chance of error. So for all of the 10 questions on the on-track student survey, they had a p-value of less than 5%, or less than 0.05, which indicates that the research is valid, with a chance of error being less than 5%. However, in the parent and staff member group, some of the question responses were not significant, and I wanted to be ethical in the disclosure of those findings. I evaluated the non-responses on the specific survey questions and placed them in the strongly disagree category, because that would be considered your worst case scenario in that situation, so that I could better analyze the data. Through further investigation, I determined that the questions which were not significant on the staff surveys were all questions where the data represented that bimodal or a 50-50 split, which represented that the two groups were equally different in their responses. In order to combat that issue, I utilized the interview process to better question why they answered the questions as they did in order to gain more insight. For my qualitative data, and this was taken from the interviews, I conducted the 6 interviews. Like I said, I took the first 2 email responses back from staff members, 2 from students, and 2 from parents. There were 6 interview questions given. Based on that data, when we looked at the areas of strength of the on-track program, they had a good social media platforms that they're already utilizing. So that was a plus. They already have some experience with that. They do set high expectations for the on-track program. So to hear that from the students, parents, and the teachers that already know that they have these high expectations, we can really move forward from there. Some of the communication avenues already exist and occur. So this would be if they're sending out emails, maybe they send out announcements, maybe they do phone blasts. It could be a situation where they have like a shared Google Doc. So having some of those avenues already was a great start. For areas of growth, the interview data represented they needed to work on translating some documents. So it seems like some people are able to understand those documents that are being sent home. Maybe in the in-person meetings, they're not fully getting all of that information that they need. So that language issue where we said there was 32% of Spanish or Latino speakers, just by translating documents, it could really help some growth there. The second was building relationships, and this was just something positive. You can always work to build those relationships and pour into people so that they feel I'm really valued here. We're all here for the same reasons, and we can keep growing from there. The third was just enhancing their social media presence. So maybe something like celebrating group successes, sending out any information, or if they ever host any events, things like that would be a great growth area for them. Based on the solutions that were given, this was a huge victory. All of the interviewees agreed on the same recommendations, and then they even enhanced the solutions further. So when I sat down with all of these interviewees, they looked at the recommendations. They were like, have you thought about this? Or we think this would be great based on our community or our needs that we see. So it's really cool to see them buy into that, which means they're going to take that further because they felt like they were involved in that process. Based on the findings, we had 4 major themes. The first being social media. So this would just be where they focus on sharing information through their Instagram, their Facebook, their Twitter, maybe TikTok if they want to go that route, because that seems to be something really popular with the students right now, but also through the Greer High School website. The second theme was the language barriers. So this was huge since I said 32% of the population are Hispanic or Latino. This is where they're going to work to translate any documents. the announcements that go on at school for students who might not know the English that's being said over the loudspeaker, any forms that are sent home, anything electronically, if they're sending out Google Docs, if they're sending out Google Forms, things like that, just so that language barrier is kind of accounted for. The third, and this is the overarching one that you might not be able to see right there, is shared informational reminders, updates, and progress reports. And this is kind of above here because it ties in with social media and eliminating the language barriers. This is where we want to see them. If it's a one case scenario where we're working with a student, we want to make sure that the parent, the teacher involved, if there's an on-track leader, and the student all have that same information. So maybe through a shared Google Doc, maybe they're all meeting together, just making sure that all 4 people involved are aware of what's going on and how we're going to move forward and help that student be more successful in the future. The fourth one, and this is the biggest, and we kept it as the last one, was building relationships and eliminating invisible barriers. So here you can see, in order to do this, I put a picture of the school's football stadium, which is about a minute or 2 down the road. And the idea here is that in order to build relationships early on, they could host a block party, maybe at the school's football stadium where it's outside, so that they could early on, let's build some relationships with those parents and students. Let's let them get to know the teachers and maybe the admin that are a part of this process as well. And then in order to eliminate that invisible barrier, those parents who maybe they're kind of hesitant to actually come on school grounds because maybe in the past when they were in high school or middle school, they had really negative impact from the school or they just had really bad experiences. So maybe if we can kind of output some of those positive experiences up front where they're not in the school building, it's kind of less intimidating. Maybe there's food and activities there for it to be a little bit more of a laid back experience. Maybe later on when we do need to have a meeting, they'll come in and they'll already understand, hey, I've got great relationships with these people. I'm not intimidated. I know we're all here for the success of my student and I want to be a part of this too. So now maybe they'll actually come to some of the brick and mortar events that are hosted at the school. It's got me stuck. Okay, for the recommendations, this is where we find the solutions to make that bridge that we saw illustrated in the 2 cliffs that were provided in the problem statement. So here's where we use the resources to build that bridge so that we can get both people together in the same place. So the first recommendation is improving social media presence. So this is where they're going to use their social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, the Gura High website, to celebrate group successes and achievements, provide informational updates, and share important information. It's important to note here that they are not going to send out any information on any of these platforms that would kind of just highlight a single student. Since this is a more sensitive program, they're going to make sure that they keep that confidential. So anything that's shared would be about a specific event. It would be about whole group successes, just so that the community can know, hey, we know what On Track is. We want to be involved in this. It's really helping student success and it's really building up our community. The second would be eliminating the language barriers. This is where they actively work to translate emails, forms, phone calls, the announcements, even social media posts. So we don't want the social media posts to only be in English either. We want those to be able to be shared and be readable by people in their native tongue. So this will just help eliminate those language barriers that exist and kind of knock down that 32% that we saw. The third would be shared information through various avenues. So this is where the stakeholders will work to provide information, updates, reminders, handouts, and progress reports by way of email, phone calls, Google Classroom, Google Sheets, Google Docs, and when in person. When I was reflecting back on the survey data and the interview process, parents and some teachers, they all listed diverse ways that they like to receive that information. They didn't all just say, I just want a phone call. Some of them said, I have a desk job. I prefer email. It's easier for me to access. Some of them said, I don't want a phone call. I work crazy hours. Some of them like a Google Doc where they could see edits made by different people. So it's really huge to have these diverse avenues for them to use just to kind of appease everyone that's involved. The fourth is building relationships and eliminating those invisible barriers. So here we would say something like hosting a back to school block party off campus, maybe at Dooley Field, which is the school's football stadium. If they really wanted to just get away totally from anything kind of school related, they could go to the local Greer City Park. They could go to the local lake, which is Lake Robinson. And the idea would be to maybe at least at the block party, have some food involved, maybe some activities where it's a little bit more laid back, but then still have a time where they can share information about the upcoming school year. And just provide them with a time to actually connect and get together and get to know one another so that when it does come time for those meetings, they feel more family oriented. In conclusion, when we look at the area of improving social media presence, I would recommend that they have an instructional technology specialist. The cost of that for someone with 0 years of experience and only a bachelor's degree would be $42,515. This person would be totally in charge of sending out things through social media, but they would also be the person on site that could help the on-track program if they have any technical technology issues, if they can't get Zoom links to work, Google Chats to work, if they're having issues transferring over documents, they could be there for that. They're not going to have to take time out to call someone from ETS and wait till they get there. They've got this person on site to do any technology issues. Or just help them to boost it in any way that they can. The second would be eliminating language barriers. So this is another big one. I would recommend that they have an in-house interpreter. The range for that in Greenville County is anywhere from $13.60 an hour to $35.40 an hour, depending on the person's degree level and level of experience. This person would be there to help translate those documents. We originally looked at having maybe one of the Spanish teachers in the school do it, but when you kind of take a look at all they would have to do, it's totally not fair for them to do that on top of their already known responsibilities. So it would be really good to have an in-house interpreter where they can come in and say, I'll help you translate anything. If it's an in-person meeting, I can be in there and help, facilitate that. Even if it's online, I can zoom in and do the same thing there. So it'd be great for them to have that person to help them in the future. The third one was shared information through various avenues. The school already has these avenues that exist, and they've already got access to all the Google platforms. They've got email, they've got phone calls and announcements. This takes no additional cost, but it is going to improve on the unity of the school. Everyone involved is getting the information, it's equitably shared. So that would be another great attribute for them. The fourth is building relationships and eliminating invisible barriers. So here there is a little bit of a cost if they wanted to do something like an event, like a block party where they host some type of a dinner. We would say that they would need about $1,300 or what would be around $10 per plate for the event where food is provided for all stakeholders. This would just be a great way to pour people in when we say through the school, hey, we're going to have this type of hamburger or hot dog supper. It seems like if you feed them, they'll come. So it's kind of the same idea here. Down at the bottom, I also have an idea where we could include community donors. So if they got somewhere like the Clock, which is a local restaurant, to come and say, we'll actually provide the hot dog supper and serve it. Those employees from the Clock could get to meet the parents and the students. And the idea there would be for them to actually end up becoming external mentors to those students. And maybe in the future, those students by their junior, senior year or post-graduation, maybe they end up getting a job at the Clock, and you kind of get to see it all come full circle, and they get to give back to the people that poured into them when they were young. So it'd be really neat to see that happen in that area there. For future research, when we're looking to the future, the first would be to assess the communications plan and reflect on the areas of growth and areas of need. This is the first communications plan that the On Track program has. So right off the dome, we're going to go with, let's actually assess it once it's enacted. Let's see where we went and see what changes need to be made. The second would be possibly looking into fundraising to generate more funds for the celebratory events. If they can really have fun events, maybe that will encourage students to really buy in and do better, whether it be attendance, whether it be their grades or behavior. If they know that if they do good, there's gonna be some fun event that gives them a incentive to look forward to and something to strive for. The third would be creating partnerships with local businesses, and organizations to increase mentoring opportunities. This is where they're gonna kind of reach out to the local, businesses and hopefully bring back those external mentors instead of them just being solely in the school. We can bring them on, maybe we could get, working experience hours or volunteer hours at those places and just really see how it positively impacts the community overall. These are my references that I use. And like to say thank you for your time. What questions do you have for me?
All right. Well, thank you, Bertie. That was great presentation. All right, we go in a particular order here, so I'll start with you, Dr. Knight. If you want to unmute yourself again, thank you for being with us today, and thank you for partnering with Garden Web and with Bertie during her dissertation and practice. Dr. Knight, questions that you have for Bertie at this point?
Honestly, no, Bertie and I have worked like close together with the On Track project right here, and I think she covered everything beautifully for me, and I am excited to go forward with her recommendations with our administration to try to get some of these things implemented for the next school year.
That's great. That's great. Again, thank you. We'll come back to you in just a few minutes. Okay. My colleague, Dr. Jones, it's now turn for her question.
Okay, so how many students do you have in this program, or what percentage maybe of students within the school are considered at risk? You know,
At the time, it was around like 130. There was 1,300 roughly students total.
so about 10%. And you said it was attendance, based on attendance, grades, or behavior.
Yes.
And how are they identified?
So they have a system called GC Source, and it tracks all of that data. So it tracks attendance, it tracks grades, and then behavior. So like through referrals that are given or anything like that. So if they're pegged in any of those areas, it'll send them to their system. But additionally, like if a student is struggling, but it seems to be more mentor, maybe it's a very gifted student, they can still be recommended to be a part of this program if they need other help in this areas.
So let's talk about just a minute about your literature review. What did you learn from your lit review, and did it, or how did it correlate to what you learned through your data collection and analysis?
The biggest thing that I learned through the literature review, specifically, it had to do with the interviews and just the process of how you go about doing that. So when you do an interview, especially in this type of setting, I didn't want to do a whole group interview with everyone that was involved. I really wanted to be intimate and a one-on-one. I learned more about how to just simply sit next to them as opposed to across from them, so they're not intimidated. It allows all those people to really give back the feedback and data that they want to say, where if someone else, like their mother or maybe their teacher was there, they might be a little bit timid to say how they actually feel. So I really learned how to just get that data, how to pose the right questions, how to get them to actually buy in. I learned a lot about buy-in through that.
What did you learn about communications tools for
the biggest
at-risk students?
Yeah, the biggest takeaway for me was like trying to appeal to them in whatever type of avenue, gets to them. For a lot of these kids, they're constantly on social media. So they'd rather get this information through social media, or maybe a TikTok video, as crazy as that sounds, that pulls their attention. So if you have a staff member get on there, do something goofy, but it resonates and gets the point across, they're gonna buy in and be like, I want to be a part of that. Or it doesn't seem I'm considered at risk, so that's a negative thing. It seems like this is something promoting me to actually be successful. So finding communication ways, whether it's for parents, which might look totally different than your students, you got to be able to appeal to everyone and make sure that it's equitably being shared, even despite any language barriers that might exist. Or technological issues, as we saw with the global 19 pandemic.
So, I guess this is the kind of a question I know the answer to, but, how will you know that you have succeeded? That once you put all these, your action plan in place, how will they know, or how will, Dr. Knight know that she's been successful? I mean, will we have no at-risk students, or, yeah.
I mean, that would be your ultimate end goal, but the reality of that would be like, that's kind of a little bit impossible. But the real goal would be to see, do we have more stakeholder involvement? Are we getting more parents actually in the school, building? Are teachers buying in? Are students buying in? Are students actually being successful and feeling like there's more incentives for them to go and do great things as opposed to just kind of sketching by? So I guess the biggest goal would be, while we're working on communications, that should in turn bring more people in and be building better relationships. So you should be able to see that throughout the community and have a little bit more awareness of, I want to be a part of that because it means something and it's actually helping these students, which in turn is going to help the community.
That's all I have.
A follow-up on that one. So there could be successes other than what we school administrators really value, which is grades, attendance, and behavior, but there's other things other than that. So your objective, so that circles back to your theoretical framework, which is, we do the same thing all the time, we get the same thing, that we have to look at our objective. So maybe that's the notion here, is when we get the buy-in, then those things will happen, but just skill and drill them won't continue. It's not worked so far.
Right.
This is a take on a different way to try to reach those kids and those parents rather than just remediation skill drill. So pretty good notion of how to use that theoretical framework. Pretty good. All right, which course impacted you the most and why?
Okay, that would be the innovation and transformation course. I just had a lot of fun in that course and was able to see I can be creative, and others around me that thought that they couldn't be creative, they were. So I learned how to go into, like, when we go into like working settings, a lot of times it's like, you're thinking, let's be super duper professional, which you should be, but you can still have a fun take on it and be creative in ways that you go about things, whether it's your processes, maybe it's the way that you implement rules, maybe it's the actual physical setting itself. So I really learned a lot and had a lot of fun in that class, and it kind of pushed me to think outside of the box in my leadership roles.
And who are you as a leader?
I think I would be considered a cross between a servant leader and a transformational leader. I love to kind of get my hands dirty and nothing is beneath me. If I'm a high up leader, it's not, beneath me to go and pick up trash or help the custodian if I've got extra time on my hands. Transformationally, I always want to see positive change and I want to leave the place better than when I started there. And I hope to kind of give that as a succession plans to the people after me as well.
I'm gonna stop our share here, if I can move all this stuff out of the way, and we're going to. All right, so I am going to move Angelique and Joe into the waiting room. There we go. All right, Bertie, if you'll come with me. While we have a discussion, a committee meeting here. Let's go around and set in the big chair. All right. Again, Dr. Knight, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
I don't know if this is a good move or not, but let's see. There we go. Let's move this back over here. I'm not sure it's a good idea to see me, but no, we're talking to the screen. All right. How's Bertie impacted your Greer High School, your organization?
She's a positive influence, positive role model. She is wonderful with the students. And when we were talking about her project, and I was sharing with her a little bit about On Track, because On Track has changed every year that I've been here. She got very excited, that she could help change it. And which is what we desperately need, because, we see so many students every year, and it's almost like nothing changes. Yes, you talk about it, but nothing really changes overall. So I'm hoping that with some of her suggestions, that it can trying to get out in the community, that, it's going to be very helpful, very beneficial.
Do you know any reason we shouldn't convert a doctorate on Bertie today?
I know of no reason not to.
All right. Well, thank you again for your participation. We'll bring her back in just a minute. I'm going to confer with my colleague here. So I'm going to mute myself, and then we'll go get back.
Okay.
All right, if everybody can hear me now, I've unmuted. I'd like to welcome back Dr. Kayla Barbare, Garden Web Community Doctor. Congratulations.
Woohoo!
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Dr. Knight.
Hey, congratulations. I'm excited.
All right, Dr. Knight, we'll go to you for words to Birdie.
Well, congratulations, and I'm so excited that you're now a doctor. I don't know what to say. I knew it was going to happen.
Thank
And you're
you.
going to be great. You're going to be great.
Thank you. Dr. Jones?
Yeah, you know, as I said to Dr. Lamb, the data collection and analysis, that was awesome. You did a really good job tying all that back to your theoretical framework. As I told you earlier in our last class, I read your DIP and your writing was excellent. You know, organization of the DIP, given, you know, that you have to kind of regroup, was really great. So, it's well deserved. I think you've been a great student, joy to have. So, congratulations. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, it's down to me, Birdie. To whom much is given, much is required. Need to have a mind for learning and a heart for serving. You know that you are a transformational servant. Birdie, how long you and I have been together now?
4 years
4 years?
on top of the admin add-on.
Yeah. That
4
you
years.
came and did that. So Birdie and I have been soldiering on for a long time now. And I know that, and that my point in that is I've come to know you over these years, and I know that you are that servant. And that's what you're going to be the only Garden Web that a lot of people ever know. And you will be a great ambassador for us, I'm quite sure. That's very important to your community. And your community is fabulous. And you're where you need to be. All right, so I'm gonna close with a prayer, and then when we get through with the formal part of the ceremony, we'll let Dr. Knight go, and then we'll let your classmates join in. So if you'll pray with me, our prayer today is Saint Teresa of Avila, better known as Sister Teresa. And the name of the prayer is, let me serve you, Lord. Lord, help me respond to the smallest prompting of your grace, so that I may be your trustworthy instrument for your honor. May your will be done in time and eternity, by me, in me, and through me. Amen. Congratulations. Dr. Knight, thank you again for being with us today. You can log out. You probably got to go back to work. All right, cohort members. Now it's your time. We'll go to Angelique first.
Woohoo! You did it, girl. That was awesome. Dr. Birdie,
Thank you.
congratulations.
Joe, you want to how you go?
You know what I'm gonna do, right, Birdie? You did it. I knew you could do it. You know, there was no doubt. It was perfect. Dr. Birdie, love you, proud of you.
Thanks, Pastor Joe. Thanks, Angelique.
Thank you. All right, we're going to close out. Thank you both for being with us today. We'll see you tomorrow at 10 on the Garden Web channel here.
Oh, I have a question. Did someone switch? You said something about Friday? And
Friday.
anybody of ours?
Yeah, Talia's going to change from week after next to next week on Friday. Her partner is going out of town, so she's going to be next Friday. That hadn't been announced yet.
Okay,
Should be coming out on email to change, and then I'll advertise it.
excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
What time is hers? Dr. Lamb?